Greetings! What I thought I'd do today is make a short video about all the books that I've read or been reading connected with the DPRK, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or as it's more commonly known here, North Korea. And the reason that I read them is obviously I was going to go there. I went last year and I've since read more and I'm planning to go again. And I find that reading a lot of books around a country really helps enrich the trip, and then afterwards helps answer some of the questions that you might have had about why this was that way or that was the other way. Now there's quite a few here, so I'm going to go through them quickly, and I'm dividing them into sections. And the first section is going to be kind of books that talk about the political history of the country and contemporary history. The first one is The Real North Korea, and that is a book by Andrei Lankov, who is a Russian academic, and he did live in his early days in Soviet times in the DPRK. He has a lot to do with anything to do with Korean studies, so also the South. His book is called Life and Politics in the Failed Stalinist Utopia. And I think that's a really bad title, because actually that suggests that he sat there talking about what an absolute mess it is in the DPRK, and he doesn't. I think of the books that I've read, this is one of the better analyses. And the main point of his book is he talks about how although the actions of the DPRK and the Kims seem really irrational at times, how it's presented in the media, it's actually a very rational country. And he talks about why they do stuff like, you know, launch missiles, which people think is mad, and, you know, while they rattle sabres, and how it all works. He's not someone that you would call pro-DPRK, but he isn't anti. He really tries to, I think, give a balanced account, which is a shame of the subheading, because that suggests he's really anti, and he isn't. I recommend this book. I would really, if you're going to read one book, I think this is a very good contender for it. So that's Andrei Lankov's The Real North Korea. The second one in that category is The Impossible State by Victor Cha. This is quite a huge book. We're talking over 500 pages. And Victor Cha was one of President George W. Bush's advisors on dealing with North Korea. And that really kind of tells you everything, because he comes at it from that perspective. I found this a really unhelpful book. I found it was really lacking in insights. And it worries me that it's people like Mr. Cha and not Mr. Lankov who are advising presidents, because he doesn't get things. One thing that was very interesting, though, for me is, you know, about half the book is obsessed with the nuclear issue and about preventing the DPRK from getting nuclear weapons, and talking, you know, really fixated on the nuclear issue. And I think that, if anything, tells you more about the USA rather than the DPRK, because they seem to be really fixated on preventing certain countries from getting certain weapons, particularly nuclear weapons. And it's very interesting, because in here he sits there and says, you know, why don't they learn the lesson of Iraq? As in, you know, if you've got weapons, we'll go after you. Whereas Lankov actually says, you know, the DPRK has learnt the lessons of Iraq, and if you don't have weapons, they'll get you, so get some quick. Again, I wouldn't really recommend this, but it is interesting if you're wanting to look at how the American political establishment views the DPRK. The third one is this one, North Korea, Another Country by Bruce Cummings. This guy is also an American, but he's, I would imagine, far more on the left than Mr. Cha. And I think it's a really good analysis. What I didn't like was all the examples were very like American-centric. So, you know, they were comparing populations with American populations, or land masses with American land masses. And it was obviously written for an audience that doesn't really include me. That said, I think a lot of his analysis is good. He's far more similar to Lankov than Cha. And so if I was going to recommend one book, it would either be Lankov's book or this one. It's a good read, this one. Okay, going on to the next category. There's 3 of these, but unfortunately, one of them I've lent to a friend, so I don't have it to show. But these are the stories. There's a whole heap of these out on the market. The people, you know, I've survived North Korea type stories, and these are all defectors telling their stories. The first one is This is Paradise, My North Korean Childhood by Hyok Kang. I enjoyed this book, and in fact I enjoyed all 3 of these that I've read. But one of the reasons why I enjoyed this book is because it talks about a guy, Hyok Kang, who's actually from a town near to the border with China that I passed through. So he really brought to life for me somewhere that we passed through on the bus, and the region that I went to. And actually, you know, there are 2 points of entry, well 3 if you include the airport, but 2 land points of entry for the DPRK. And one is the main one that people use when they go to Pyongyang, but the other is up in Tumen in China, crossing over the Tumen River to Namyang. And that's the trip I went on that one, and we went to the North Hamgyong province, which is the most isolated and economically backward. And if you're going there, buy these kind of books, because most of the defectors come from that province. And during the famine in the early 2000s, that's where a lot of the defectors left from. And so for that, it was really relevant. It's a dead easy book to read. It's only about 200 pages. And what's quite nice is the guy who wrote it was very young. He was a teenager when he left. And there's some very childlike episodes, and it's very human. And he also draws pictures. I mean, okay, he's not Picasso, but it's nice to look at these pictures of life as he remembered it in the DPRK. So that makes that book really quite a nice one. That said, it is lacking in detail and lacking in, you know, if you really want to delve in, it doesn't have that. It's just a story of a kid from the DPRK. The next one is The Aquariums of Pyongyang by Kang Chol-Hwan, together with Pierre Rigoulot, I think that would be pronounced, who's a journalist. My main issue with this, starting off, is surely it should be Aquaria. I would have thought the plural of aquarium is Aquaria. I don't know. This one wasn't as relevant to me because it's about a guy from Pyongyang. Nothing to do with North Hamgyong province. But what he does is he actually is sent to a prison camp. So it talks about life within a prison camp in the DPRK. It's well written, as it should be when you've got a ghostwriter, and it's a compelling read. It's a bit gory in places, but I would say that's quite a good one to read. My favourite is the one that I can't show you, but it's called Nothing to Envy by Barbara Demick, and that one, she was a journalist who worked in South Korea, and she collected hundreds of stories, and then used, 10 or 20 of them to make that book. So it's not one person's tale. The other ones are, first person, one person tale. But I liked it because it really went deeper into the life in the DPRK, and they were all from North Hamgyong province. So it was places that I actually ended up going to, like the city of Chongjin. A lot of it was centered around. So that was great because when I was in Chongjin, I was thinking, oh, that's that place she wrote about, and there's that place. And they're really nice human stories. They're about, people falling in love, people struggling during the famine and that. That said, all of them are written by people who have defected. So people who have defected are never going to be people in love with the country that they left. And people who've gone through the I forget what they call it, but the South Koreans have like a 3-month intensive, one might call it, brainwashing session if you were being uncharitable. And they're all living in South Korea now. So therefore you're going to get a one-sided view. And of course, the reports are uncorroborated. I don't know. I mean, why would people lie? Maybe they. I think there's certainly going to be a degree of truth in them. I think there certainly is. But I just think you got to be aware of the agenda of the people. Also, after you've read a few, you get, there's a general formula to them. You know, this is my life in the DPRK. Then the famine came and it got really bad, and so we left. And this is how we lived undercover for a while in China, and this is how we got to South Korea. And then, interestingly, at the end, and the last chapter is always how we struggled to adjust to life in South Korea. But yeah, that's those ones. There are more on the market. If I were to recommend one, it would be Nothing to Envy by Bob Demick. Now I'm going to go on to travel logs, and the bad news is that if you want travel logs, unless you want to read mine, there aren't many there about the DPRK. And the only one I have found is this. And this is called To Dream of Pigs, Travels in South and North Korea by a gentleman, he's an English gentleman called Clive Leatherdale. Essentially, this is a travelogue about the South. And it's a very good travelogue about the South. His character comes across well in it. And then at the end, he basically thinks, oh, do you know what? I might try and go to the North as well. This was written in the 90s when it was very hard to travel to the North. So he went to Beijing, got a visa from the DPRK embassy in Beijing, and went on a Pyongyang city tour, basically, and down to the DMZ. It doesn't tell you a lot. But it is interesting reading about the two Koreas and, you know, how he tries to compare and contrast them. I would recommend it as a book, but again, it's far better on the South than the North. Okay, now I've got the travel guides, and there is only one travel guide produced outside of the DPRK, or at least in English, that deals solely with the DPRK, and that is Bradt, North Korea. As people who watch my vlogs know, I am a big fan of Bradt. I think they're amazing. I love them for their background, cultural and historical information, and this has loads. It is a little different from some of their others because it's very short on things like accommodation listings or transport options, because everybody goes on an organised tour, so you don't need the local bus times because you can't go on them anyway if they exist. So it basically is just the cultural and historical information. My issue with it is the title, North Korea. It should be titled the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Why? Because when I got to the border, it was confiscated off me. And their reason was that it was called North Korea rather than the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. And there was also another issue. Here, I think it's this one. As you can see, there's a picture of part of a statue. And they didn't like that because in the DPRK, you're meant to have the whole of the statue in the picture or not at all. I think it was that one they had an issue with. That said, you know, I wrote to Bradt afterwards and said, look, it got confiscated for these reasons. They said that mine was the first time they'd heard of one of these being confiscated, probably because I went through a lesser used border. They took on board the statue one. They didn't take on board the title one. But they did give me another copy free. So do you know what? Fair play to Bradt. But it's a well-written book, and it's certainly, even if you're going to be do or take that or don't, you know, buy one, read it before, and read it afterwards. It is well worth getting. As with any Bradt guide, I would say yes, buy this book. Okay. The other travel book that I've got is this Panorama of Korea, and this is the first of the books that I actually bought within the DPRK. So this is made in Pyongyang in 2013. And it's, as you can see there, it's lots of glossy photos and a short summary of each place. It's actually quite good, to be honest. It's quite readable. It is a very DPRK perspective, so it won't be exactly like your Bradt one. And it's got virtually no practical information, but like I say, everybody goes on organised tours, so you don't really need the practical information like you would do in other countries. if you see it when you're there, buy it. It's quite good because, like I say, I didn't have my main guidebook, and this was what I used along with a map that I brought to kind of navigate myself around whilst I was there. It is pretty thorough. There's lots of info in there, and it's pretty well written. I mean, the problem with a lot of locally produced things is sometimes the English can be really jarring to read, but this one isn't too bad. So that's that. Now I'm on to my assorted other books. And the next one is one that I bought within the DPRK. It is called Kim Il-sung Condensed Biography. If you go there, books looking like this, there's loads of them. There's collected works of Kim Il-sung, and there's so many of these books produced. And I bought this one because this seemed to be like the short read one. It's 300 odd pages. I expected it to be very hard to read. I actually found it. I read it within a week. It was a lot easier to read than I thought it would be. That said, a lot of people mock the literature that comes out of the DPRK, and I think one of the reasons is their style of writing is so alien to us that we struggle with it. So I could sit there and, if I read, I don't know, the beginning. Kim Il-sung was born in Mangyongdae, Pyongyang City on April the 15th, Juche-1, brackets 1912. All the members of Kim Il-sung's family were revolutionaries who fought valorously for the sovereignty and independence of the country and for the freedom and happiness of his people. Kim Ung-woo, his great-grandfather, was a patriot who stood in the van of the fight to sink the General Sherman, an armed marauding US merchant vessel, in 1866. And so on. The language is very revolutionary, very, very positive. And we're not used to that. We're used to kind of more nuanced stuff. So I think it's hard to adjust for a while. It's also, it's very interesting how certain things are referred to in it. So Kim Jong-suk, who was Kim Jong-il's mother and Kim Il-sung's wife, she's just introduced as a great revolutionary. And then, there's no talk about their romance. There's nothing very human there. It's just, yes, they got married. Yes, she had a son. That's it. And she was a great revolutionary. And that's not how we would write. But then that's a cultural thing, maybe. I mean, maybe other East Asian books would not be so different. Again, it was a lot easier to read than I thought. So, and it's not too big. So buy that if you see it. The next one I haven't read yet. This is Kim Jong-il, The Great Man, and this seems to be very much in the same mould as the Kim Il-sung one, except that it focuses on his character. So it says extraordinary personality, and then it goes through his attributes and gives examples. So the manly personality, the rich, rich emotions, rare talents, rare habits, noble hobbies. And again, we wouldn't write a book like that, and it can be a little strange to read, I think. And it is, it's not critical, but then one wouldn't expect it with a book of that title. Now, I can't tell you whether to buy this or not, because, to be honest with you, I haven't read it yet. But yeah, you see that one on sale everywhere. The next one is this one. This is by a photo artist. It's French, I think. It's in English and French. It's called Kim Jong-il Looking at Things. It comes from an internet site, and it's basically photos of Kim Jong-il. There's one. Looking at something, and then the next page will say, looking at a metal tube, or looking at a soft drink, looking at a textile worker, and so on and so forth. It is rather amusing, I have to say. It's quite a subtle humour. It doesn't teach you anything much about the DPRK, but there's lots of great pictures of the dear leader, if that's what you're into. My next book is another one I haven't read yet. It is called Mother of Korea, a Novel, and it's all about Kim Il-sung's mum. It seems, the bits that I've read so far, to read pretty much like the other ones that I've talked about, the Kim Il-sung one. There are some nice pictures in it, though. Some great examples of revolutionary art. I love revolutionary art. Which Then leads me on to my last one, which I also bought there. And this is Kim Jong-suk, Mother of Korea. If you don't know anything about Kim Jong-suk, she is the most perfect woman that ever existed. I know. I went to a museum about her and sat through 18 rooms telling me that. She was, as I said before, Kim Jong-il's mum and Kim Il-sung's wife. This gives you a short background onto her life, but I just love this book for the pictures. So there shows the young revolutionary Kim Jong-suk. You know, there she is teaching kids in the revolutionary camp. I love the artwork. I would really recommend buying this. This image, I love that. It looks almost like an Indian religious image, you know, where she's imparting, like a guru imparting wisdom. So, I love these kind of books, and I believe there are many more on sale there. When I go back, I will certainly try to buy them. So that is my guide to books for the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. I hope it's been helpful to you. And I'll leave you this fantastic revolutionary image of Kim Jong-suk and Kim Il-sung and say thanks for watching and keep travelling.